All right, well, thank you for joining me for today's session, Excel Speed Loop. My name's Jeff. I'm glad that you're here. I am a Microsoft certified trainer, and I love sharing the things that I've learned about Excel over the years, especially those things that help us get our work done faster, right? That's what it's all about. And I'm excited for today's session because we get to talk about the Excel Speed Loop. Now, we're all at different places on our Excel journey. But we all start at the same place, right? We all start doing our work the slow way. This means the manual way. It's just because we haven't learned a lot about Excel. We don't know how to automate things. We don't know how the features fit together, how the functions and formulas work. So we end up doing a lot of our work the manual way, which I call the slow way. But we all have this shared goal, right, of getting our work done the fast way, the automated way. And so the question becomes, what is the bridge? Right? How do we close this gap? And it turns out to be two things, process and skills. And by process, what I mean is, what is the structured approach? What is the system that we use to optimize our workbooks for efficiency and accuracy? Some people might think of this as an overall framework or a process or structure or an approach. Pick whatever term you want, but it really means, how do we systematically optimize our workbooks for efficiency and accuracy? So we need that process. Also, we need skills. These are the Excel skills. These are VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, Power Query, tables, you get the idea. And we need them both. So the process that I teach is called the Speed Loop process, and that is the goal of this session. I really want to make sure that you can walk away understanding how this process works. But in order to really demonstrate the process, I'm going to need to show some Excel skills along the way. What are the Excel skills? These are Excel features and functions. And so to do the demonstration, I'm gonna have to show some skills, but I'm not really teaching the skills as much as I really want to zoom out and focus on the overall process. Now, in addition to the download site that's been made available, I want to let you know for the next couple of weeks, the files are also going to be made available at exceluniversity.com/global. So that's another place to grab the files. So let's zoom way out for a moment before we dig into the details. I teach the speed loop using an investor metaphor, right? And what does an investor want to do? They want to do three things, right? They want to invest money into assets that appreciate or increase in value over time. And ultimately, they want to realize a gain. They want to get a return on their investment, right? And we are just like that. Except instead of investing money, we're investing time, right? We're investing time. And just like an investor, we want to invest our time wisely into assets that appreciate in value over time. Our assets, those are our workbooks. Those are our recurring use workbooks, okay? And then ultimately our goal is the same. We want to realize a gain. For us, that just means we want to get more time back than the amount of time that we've put in to improve these workbooks, okay? So that's kind of the big picture. Those are the three stages. Now it's time to unpack all of the details. When I was the accounting manager working for a public company, I was busy. That just means I had more work than time. And I don't know if you can relate to that, but I'm sure that you can. But I had more work than time. And what that meant was I had to work late nights to get everything done. I had to come in on weekends to get everything done. I had a poor work-life balance. I was stressed out. I was cranky. I was grouchy. I would come home grumpy. And I felt a lot like this dude, like, no, right? No, I've got enough. And so I felt like this. But the good news is that this is, or from this experience, from this pain, is what came the speed loop. In other words, I developed the speed loop to get me out of this situation. I knew things had to get better, and they did. And so that's what I've kind of formalized, and that's what I teach now as the speed loop. So let's talk about the first stage. This is the I stage. Everything here starts with the letter I. I did that to kind of keep it easy to remember. But this is our invest time stage. And what we want to do is two things, identify and insert. Identify and insert. And what that stands for is this. We want to identify our recurring project workbooks. Those are the workbooks we update every day, week, month, quarter, year. Because like a real investor, we want to invest wisely. We want to invest into assets that have the opportunity to give us a return on our investment. The only ones that have a chance at doing that are the things that we do every day, week, month, quarter, year, right? Not the one-time projects, but the recurring projects. So we first want to identify the project and then all of the workbooks that are used to accomplish that project, right? So that is the step one, identify. And then the second thing we want to do is identify or insert. That means we want to insert lead sheets. Insert lead sheets. Lead sheets isn't any kind of an Excel thing. It's just a name that reminds me that they come first. They're administrative in nature. So we want to identify the workbooks. We want to prepare them for what comes next. We want to prepare them for the loop. In order to get them ready to go through this process, we insert lead sheets, okay? Now to make this more concrete, let me flip to Excel to demonstrate here. This is our monthly report, all right? And this is a workbook we update every month. And basically, you know, just for illustration, I kept it pretty simple. But what we do is we paste in a bunch of transactions from some system, from an accounting system, HR, inventory, AP, you know, ERP, whatever you're working with. But we paste in some data. And then from that comes a report. Right? It doesn't matter. This is a formula-based report. You could use pivot tables. Really, the illustration is we're pasting in some data. We're updating a report. We do it all the time. We've identified this as our recurring project workbook. We want to prepare it for the loop. So we need to insert lead sheets. So let me go to a workbook called Lead Sheets. And this is available for download. And the idea is use this as a starting point. You want to add stuff that you want to add, delete stuff that's not useful, make changes to things that you want to modify. This is just an illustration to get you started. And the idea is you'd have a workbook. I call mine lead sheets, call it whatever you want. But you have this workbook on your network and you have a variety of different lead sheets that you can insert into your workbooks when you're preparing them for the loop. So for example, I have a start here worksheet and it has the purpose. It has some input cells, it has some instructions for how to do the updates, it has some assumptions. And I consider the Start Here sheet recurring project workbooks. The next worksheet is called Error Check. And this is going to help us spot errors and potential errors. And this is going to help us in the next step. And then I have the admin sheet. And the admin sheet is going to be administrative in nature, and it's going to store sort of administrative notes. Then depending on what you're working on, you could have other lead sheets. For example, maybe you're working with a complex data flow. So you want to document where does the data start, how do we export it, where does it come from, how does it flow through the workbook, what are some of the data model relationships, what are some of the measures, what are the data types, how do we define our columns, all of that kind of stuff. And depending on what you're working on, you may need more space for instructions, so break it out on its own sheet. Same with assumptions, break it out on a shown sheet. Maybe you want to track change log. This is going to be who requested what change and when, and so you can track that. So you get the idea. These are just administrative in nature. So once we've identified our recurring project workbook, we prepare it for the loop by inserting our lead sheets. The three that I'm going to insert now are Start Here, Error Check, and Admin. So I simply group select those and I right click and move or copy, and I want to create a copy and I move it into the monthly report workbook and I click OK. And then I would repeat that for additional workbooks that I'm trying to optimize. Once I'm done with that, then I can go ahead and close the lead sheets workbook. And now I'm back to the monthly report workbook. I have data, reports, and then my 3 lead sheets. Once we have inserted these lead sheets, the next thing we want to do is to document these instructions. All right. And there's a chance that you already have similar instructions in your recurring project workbooks, right? Maybe you've been doing this for so long, you don't have the instructions documented because you just know what to do. That's fine. But I would encourage you to take a few moments and document every single manual step that is required every time you update this workbook. I don't care if this manual step takes 30 seconds, right, Jeff? It doesn't take much time. Just write it down. Get it, every manual step in here that we have to do, because this is going to be the list that we automate. Okay, so if it's not in the list, we're just going to kind of forget about it. So add all of the manual steps that are required to update the workbook. And what I like to have is a time column. And my time column isn't very precise. I just kind of round it to 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, that kind of thing. But it's important for a couple of reasons. Now, the first reason is that it helps us prioritize. Right? It helps us prioritize which ones we want to automate first, right? The ones that take the most time. So we might want to start with this new account because it takes the most time. But that's just kind of gives us a guide for how to prioritize these manual steps. The other thing it does, that depending on where you're working and depending on your role, may come in handy, is in your annual review. You'll have a record of all of the time that you've saved this last year, and that might come in handy during your annual review and say, look how much time I just saved the company, show me the money. I don't know. So it just kind of depends on where you're working, but that's the idea. So take a few moments and add how much time each of these steps takes. Now, once we've identified the recurring workbooks, once we've prepared them for the loop by inserting the lead sheets, it's time to go to the next stage. So let's go to here and let's take a look at this next stage. This one is called Appreciate Assets. And the idea here is simply this. We want to increase their value over time. And you're going to see in this diagram that this is the most predominant visual in the diagram, and that's because it really is the heart of this process. It's the heart of the speed loop process. It's where we're going to spend the most time. You'll also notice that I drew this using arrows that go around and around, like in a cycle, right? And that's exactly right. We're going to be in this loop for many potential cycles, for many months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, right? And so the 3 steps in this stage are the following: automate, anticipate, and accumulate. And we keep going around and around until we're done. What they stand for is this: automate manual steps. Which manual steps? The steps we just got done documenting in the previous step, right? The list of start here instructions. So we want to automate those manual steps. That is going to improve our efficiency. And while we're thinking about improving efficiency, we also want to think about improving accuracy. So that's where the next step comes in. Anticipate. That means anticipate errors. Anticipate potential errors. And we want to detect them, we want to prevent them, and we want to address them. And that is where the error check worksheet that we talked about is going to come in handy, and we'll go and update that together here in a bit. Once we've done the automate as many manual steps as possible, given our current amount of time availability and given our current Excel knowledge, and after we've anticipated and addressed errors, then it comes for the third step, which is accumulate. This means accumulate Excel skills, right? In other words, we ask ourselves, hey, given my time availability and given my current Excel knowledge, I will automate as many of the steps as possible. And then I need to accumulate the Excel skills that I need in order to automate the remaining steps. Because here's the deal. Excel is used by millions of users to do millions of different things. And so I may not need the solver, right? You might need solver. I might need VLOOKUP. You might not. You might need pivot tables. I might not, right? So we accumulate those skills that we need in order to automate those specific manual tasks. And we go around and around and around for as long as needed until all or almost all of those manual steps have been automated. And by the way, Jeff, automate, like what does that mean? Do I have to be a VBA code ninja wizard, No, automate is kind of a techie term, but really for the purposes of this discussion, all it really means is this, that we're going to get Excel to do that step for us. And we're just going to use the built-in Excel features and functions to do that, right? It doesn't mean we have to do VBA solutions, although we certainly could. It just means I'm using the Excel features and functions to get Excel to do those steps for me. That's the idea, okay? Let's see this in practice, and I'm going to head back to Excel. Okay. So let's go to this first one, data source. Okay, what this is saying is this: Jeff, we need to copy paste accounting system data CSV export to the data worksheet. And so we say, hey, given my current Excel knowledge, do I have the ability to automate this step right now? Well, maybe I haven't learned about Power Query yet. Maybe I'm on a part of my journey where I haven't explored that. So maybe I don't know how to automate it. That's fine. Let's just skip it, go to the next one. But it's here, so remember to get it at some point in the future. So let's go to the next one. What's the next one? Enter effective date into the report sheet. What this is telling me is this: hey, Jeff, every time you update this, you need to be sure to type in the effective date right into this cell so that when you deliver this report, people know, what is the date. Okay, and let's take a look at the next step, which is enter the effective date into the data sheet as well. So that means, Jeff, just don't forget, you also have to type it in here, okay? So I'm typing in the same value in multiple places. So just to kind of get warmed up with a simple kind of illustration is this: anytime we find ourselves entering the same value over and over again into a variety of different places within the workbook, we'll often be able to get our work done faster by centralizing that input into a single input cell. And that's what I use the Start Here sheet for, right? These are all the input cells, right? There's only one in this example, but you get the idea. So we would type in 430, 2030. Great. And then we would retrieve that value into all of the different worksheets throughout the workbook where it's needed. This could be something as simple as a direct cell reference, like equals and this and enter. That's fine. Maybe it's something more elaborate though. Maybe we're using the text function to apply a format like the month name fully spelled out, and maybe we're using concatenation to say for the period ending or for the month ended. Okay, you get the idea. So we can be as creative as we need to be. In this case, I'll just keep it simple here, and I'll just go with another direct cell reference, equals this and enter. So we can change that value in one place, 531, 2030, and that change is reflected throughout, and that is excellent. And so let me go ahead and change this back to this. And what we can do now is we can grab this manual step that has been delegated to Excel. We don't have to do this step anymore. So rather than delete it, I'm just going to log it over on my admin sheet so that when I go in for my annual review, I'm going to have this list of everything that I was able to accomplish this year, and then delete that. Now the next step is enter the effective date into the data sheet. Well, I don't have to enter it into the data sheet anymore, but I do have to enter it into the Start Here sheet. Okay, so that's the idea. What's the next one? The next one is more rows. If more rows in the data range, be sure to include in report. What is this telling me? This is saying, Jeff, here's the deal. When you export the data next period, you send it into a CSV, you open that up, you copy it, and you paste, and you need to be careful for more rows. What if there are more rows next period? Well, let's look at the formula. And the formula here uses the SUMIFS function. And by the way, if you haven't explored the SUMIFS function, to me, it's a critical Excel skill. And there's tons of posts available for it. Feel free to check out my blog to get more. I have tons of articles on it. It's one of my favorite Excel functions. But when we look at this, what we see is it goes through row 19, and it goes through row 19. So what this step is reminding me is, Jeff, when there are more rows next period, like this, of 1,000, don't forget that that will not automatically make it into the report. So don't forget that you have to manually update or rewrite this formula. And that is a manual step. And this is the exact kind of manual step that we can delegate to Excel by simply using Excel features and functions, right? So watch this. Let me go ahead and delete that new row. And instead of storing this data in an ordinary range, we're going to store it in a table instead. So to do that, I'm going to select any cell within the range, insert table. Our table has a header row, so I click OK. By the way, tables are, again, to me, I feel like they're a critical Excel skill. If you haven't had the opportunity to explore this, feel free to check out my blog. I have tons of freely available articles about it. But tables have names. And that means we can reference the values in a table through its name. We can reference the entire table by using the table name. We can also reference individual columns within the table by using a structured table reference. For example, if I wanted to refer to the amount column, I would put in a structured reference like this. They generally begin with the table's name, followed by the column name enclosed in square brackets. Okay. So once we've inserted the table, we just have to update our formula to reference those table values. So what we're going to say is this, and by the way, if you haven't played with the sum is function, it's a conditional summing function. And what it sounds like is this. I'm asking the sum is function to go add up this column of numbers. Which column? Table 1's amount column. So go add up table 1's amount column, comma, but only include those rows where table 1's account num column, comma, is equal to our account num. We hit enter and it's still 2,300. We should be able to fill this down and we get 15,745. And so I think we look good. And now with that change done, let's go back and test it. Their current total is 15,745. Let's go back here. Let's add a new one. 4805, 430, 2030, 5022, overhead 1000. And you'll notice here that the table automatically expanded, right? It automatically expanded. And that works whether you're typing or pasting. Let's do another one, 4806, 4030, 2030. Let's do 5040. Let's do marketing of 1000. The table auto expanded. Let's go to our report and yes, 17,745. So those new values, those new rows automatically came into the report. Now, I intentionally reused an existing account. In other words, I reused an account that was already here. What happens if there are new accounts? We're getting to that here in a moment. But for now, the key takeaway is we store data in tables because tables auto expand, and now we're not having to rewrite our formulas. So guess what? It's another manual step that's been delegated to Excel. So no longer do we have to do this. So I'm going to cut this. I'm going to paste it over here. Let's go back here and let's delete this. Okay, good. What's next? All right, next is new accounts. So what this is telling me is this, Jeff, if there is a new account, you need to insert it into the report manually. What this is referring to is, and let me delete these new rows, is this. Here I have these accounts in this formula-based report. It adds up to 15,745. Let's go over here. Let's add something new. 4805, 4030, 2030. Let's create a new account, right? Let's say someone added a new account during the period, or maybe you're not working with accounts. Maybe you're working, there's a new department, there's a new employee, right? There's a new vendor, a new supplier. You get the idea. Let's call it 5060. Let's call it internet. And let's call it 1000. The table auto expanded. So like that's good. But when we click over to the report, we see it's not here. It's not here. So to get it here, what does that look like? Well, that looks like a manual step, right? It looks like inserting a new worksheet row. It looks like typing a bunch of stuff. It looks like filling the formula down. That's the manual step. How can we eliminate that manual step? Well, lots of different ways to approach this, but one way is by converting this traditional formula-based report into a pivot table report. So what does that look like? Well, once again, I think a pivot table is a critical Excel skill. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, I have tons of freely available blog posts that are going to walk you through step by step. But in summary, here's what we do. We select our data table. We go to Insert Pivot Table. We select Existing Worksheet. We click here. We click the top left cell and we click OK. And now all we're trying to do is to define the report structure. And the way that we define the report structure is by inserting these fields. What are fields? Fields are the columns into one of four layout areas. Okay, and this will take a little bit of practice, but basically in our case, we're trying to simply replace this formula-based report with a pivot table. So we already know what the report structure is. It starts with the account number. So we're going to take the account number and we're going to place it into the rows layout area. Next, we have the account name. So we take the account name, drop it here. And finally, we have the amount. So we take amount and that goes in values. And let's scroll down and let's take a look. We have 15,745, 15,745. So we're like, it's the same like total, like the numbers look good, like wages 2,300, wages 2,300, but this format doesn't like look right, right? It doesn't look like my formula-based report. No problem. We're about 5 clicks away from getting this pivot table to look exactly like this formula-based report. So here's what we do. Pivot table, ribbon tab, design. We change the report layout to tabular. Okay. We turn subtotals off. Okay, we're looking better already. We turn off row headers. That gets rid of this bold font. Good. We basically turn off the plus minus buttons, which are these little plus minus buttons. So we just toggle that off. We can turn it on or off anytime, no worries. And finally, we just change this formatting. So to do that, we right click, number format, and we go to number, no decimals, comma, click OK, and now we've got it. Okay, now we've got it. And now we can delete this formula-based report, and now we have our pivot table report. So now let's go back and see what happens when there is a new account. Just like before, we're going to go with 4805, 430, 2030, 5060 internet of 1000. The table auto expanded, so that's good. We go to the report, it's not there, but all we need to do is right click and refresh, and it's there. Okay, and so so pivot tables are more dynamic than traditional formula-based reports. So this represents yet another step that we can delete and move over here. Okay, good. All right, excellent. So those are some examples of delegating our manual steps to Excel using Excel features and functions. That's going to improve efficiency. Now let's talk about that next step of anticipate errors or addressing errors. This is basically the review step, right? And what we're going to do is we basically know what steps we look for, or what relationships or what conditions we look for when we're manually doing a review. So all we're doing in this step is really asking Excel to like help us with our review. So for that, I like to have an error check worksheet. And there are all kinds of different ways you can format this. Format whatever format it however you like. Take the ideas you like, discard the ideas you don't, no worries. But the way that I like to do it is I like to ask a question. And the affirmative or the true means that this test has passed. So I'm going to literally create one of these for each thing that I review, right? So this could be 3, 5, 10, 100 tests. And then up top, I have a cell that basically says, have all of the tests passed? And then I just use conditional formatting to do the formatting. So if this goes out of balance, this all goes red. Again, this is just conditional formatting. I think it's a pretty cool Excel skill to pick up. So if you haven't checked it out, it's under conditional formatting. Again, check out my blog. I have tons of freely available resources on conditional formatting. So in this case, what we are wanting to look at is this. Does the report summary agree to the detail? Tests that you might use would be things like, I don't know what you're working on. Maybe do debits equal credits? Does total assets equal total liabilities and equity? Does the total on the detail tie to the total on the summary? Does this column value check over here? Does cash on the balance sheet tie to cash on the, you get the idea, right? And so all we need to do is retrieve those values and tie out their difference. And again, you could make this more compact by just having an if statement. So format it however you want, but I like to kind of see the tie out, or I like to see the details here. Helps me with my review. So for the summary, equals, let's go to the report, select the cell. Excel automatically inserts the get pivot data function. I hit enter, and now I've pulled back the value on the summary. What's the total on the detail? The total on the detail is equals sum, and that was table 1, and that was amount. Close the square bracket, close the function, and enter. And now we've retrieved these values. This diff is 0, so this is happy and green, and all of my tests pass, so this is happy and green. And that's the idea of the error check. And you would just take your time, and as you do your normal review, you just set up a test here. And that way, when we do the update, we have refreshed everything, we can look in here, are all systems go, everything green, we're good to go, good, let's move on. So that's the idea of the error check worksheet, okay? Good? All right, excellent. Let's go back to here, and let me see if I can look at this. Okay, there we go, excellent. Now let's go ahead and look at the next thing. The next thing is realize gain. Okay. And before I take you to that, let me show you a couple of quick resources in case you haven't explored some ifs. I want to take you to a blog post, and I want to take you to an article. So just head to the Excel University website. You can click blog, and you could do a search, of course, or you can look for any topics that you want to learn more about. For example, maybe I want to learn more about sum ifs, just click here. It's going to filter a list for all of the sum ifs functions. You can click tables, and so you can search or browse to find the articles that you're interested in. In addition to these informal articles, I also write like formal published articles. So if you wanted to check out any of those, click on publications. And here you can view all the different articles and books, and feel free to check anything out that you are interested in. And you can click on any article and get to the details of that, okay? So let's go back to here, and let's go to this step here called realize gain. The idea for this step is this. We've just spent 3 months, 6 months, 9 months in the loop. We've done automate, anticipate, we've accumulated Excel skills, and we got everything pretty much dialed in. So once all or almost all of those manual steps have been automated, now it's time to step out of the loop. And when we step out of the loop, we go to this third and final stage. This is the R stage, everything starts with R, realize gain. And this is all about leveraging the time savings. Leveraging the time savings. So there's 2 steps, rebuild and reinvest. So rebuild, what is this? It's exactly what it sounds like. We're rebuilding all of these workbooks from scratch. Jeff, time out. You are crazy. I just spent 3 months, 6 months, 9 months getting them all dialed in. They're like working great now. What do you mean rebuild them? Yeah, rebuild them. Rebuild them all from scratch. Jeff, you're crazy. I know, I am crazy, but here's the benefit. When we rebuild them from scratch, we have the opportunity to look at the scope of all of the workbooks in that project, and we can make fundamental changes. For example, legacy workbooks maybe had 3 workbooks that all started with the same data source. Maybe it makes sense to combine those 3 independent workbooks into a single workbook. So when we're rebuilding, we're considering them as a whole. Or maybe the reverse is true. Maybe we have one mega workbook that makes sense to break down into more modular components. That's fine. Another thing about rebuild is this. When we are just going through these incremental improvements during the loop, what we kind of get tied into is the legacy approach, the traditional Excel approach. In other words, when these workbooks were first built a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe you didn't even build them, maybe you inherited them, stuff like Power Query and Power Pivot didn't exist. So what is likely there is something like a bunch of workarounds. In other words, I have a pivot table. I can't create a pivot table based on multiple tables. So therefore, traditionally what we've done is we've imported all the transactions. We've imported a chart of accounts lookup table. We've done a VLOOKUP to bring in the account name. And then we've created that pivot table on that single table. because that's how traditional pivot tables work. But now, when we do the rebuild, we can consider using more modern Excel approaches like Power Pivot so that we eliminate that whole helper column VLOOKUP kind of a thing, because then we can create a pivot table based on multiple tables. Or maybe there's Power Query, right? Maybe when these original workbooks were built, Power Query didn't exist, so we had a lot of workarounds, a lot of manual transformations. Now we can just do all that inside of Power Query. Plus, there are formulas. So rather than just copy paste the formulas from the old to the new, which by the way, if we did that, all we're going to end up with is a copy of the old, right? Instead of that, what we want to do is rewrite our formulas from scratch, because here's why. The formulas that you are able to write now, after you've accumulated all of these Excel skills, are much better. They're more elegant, they're more reliable, they're more bulletproof than the formulas that you were able to write 3 months, 6 months, 9 months ago before you accumulated all these skills. And maybe you weren't even the person that wrote the original formulas. Maybe your predecessor wrote them, or maybe your predecessor's predecessor's predecessor wrote them. And I'm sure that you can write better formulas now at this point in the process. So we rebuild the workbook from scratch using modern approaches. So let's flip to Excel and let's kind of check this out. Let's go here and let's take a look at this step. And by the way, this review, we can cut and we can paste here and we got it. Now, let's take a look at this. Data source. Copy paste accounting system data CSV into the data worksheet. That is talking about this. Opening up the CSV, doing a copy, pasting it into this manual table. But now we have access to some new tools. Power Query, Power Pivot. So let's go to data from text CSV and we double click on the CSV file, current. This is going to open up a preview. If we needed to do any transformations, we could click on transform data. What are transformations? It's just a techie term, right? It's just meaning we're preparing the data for use. We're cleaning it up and getting it ready. It might mean splitting some columns, combining some columns, removing some rows, deleting some columns, adding calculated columns, doing some unpivots, transposes. You get the idea, we're just kind of cleaning it up. In this case, our data looks fine. So we're gonna load to. We're going to load to a table in an existing worksheet. This is fine, and we click OK. And now the benefit is next period, we update that CSV, we export a new file, and now all we need to do is right-click and refresh. And now Power Query does that instead of us manually copy-pasting data. So all we need to do to update our workbook is delete this manual table, okay? And let's go tell our pivot table report, and we're going to go to change data source. And we're going to say instead of adding up table 1, we're going to use the values in the table called current. We click OK, 15,745, and we got it. Okay. So now this is another step here that we can cut and paste. And let's go ahead and get this one while we're here too. Effective date. This is a manual step where we type our effective date as a variable. And we could continue to type this, but another kind of big picture idea is this. We want to try to replace manual input cells with formulas whenever possible. Why? Because a manual input cell is something that we are typing in. A formula is something that Excel is calculating for us. It's another way to think about delegating steps to Excel. So there are many different approaches to do this. One way that we can do it is just say, hey, let's just take the max date of this data column here. And we could use EO month, or we could get fancy, but for now we'll just keep it simple. And now this is yet another manual step that's been automated. So I can actually cut this from here, head over to here, and paste. Okay, good. All right, and finally for this input cell, I usually like to use these cell styles. And to me, this input cell style means, hey Jeff, a manual input is required here. But since we've automated that, instead what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna change this to calculation. That's just an optional step, but that's communicating with me, hey, hands-free, this is a formula, don't type anything in there. And we could use worksheet or workbook protection if we need to, but that's the basic idea, okay? So let's head back to here and let's go to the next step, reinvest, okay? So we've identified the recurring project workbooks. We've prepared them for the loop by inserting our lead sheets. We've sent them through the loop for as long as it took, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. We've increased their value by appreciating these assets. We've automated manual tasks that improves efficiency. We've anticipated errors that improves accuracy. We've accumulated additional Excel skills that we need to automate the steps. We go through, we've stepped out, we've done the rebuild. And so now these workbooks are totally dialed in. And now the final step is to simply reinvest that time savings wisely, right? What does that mean? It means different things for different people, right? For me, what it meant was this, helping other departments do what I did, right? In other words, I got my monthly close dialed in, down from 2 weeks to 2 days, that I had all this extra time, and I loved this like improvement process. So that kind of became my role. My role kind of shifted from closing the books to like automating everything, right? And so, hey, Jeff, can you help me automate this whole commissions process? Yeah, let's send it through the loop, bring it on over. Hey, Jeff, can you help me do the patents? Yeah, bring it on over. Hey, Jeff, can you help me with payroll? Yes, bring it on over. And so for me, that was a much more enjoyable role that it kind of morphed into from just the mechanics of closing the books. Maybe it means, hey, I'm going to take this time and reinvest it in myself, right? Maybe I'm actually going to leave the building for lunch. Maybe it means I'm going to take a course, an online course, a course at a community college. Maybe it's going to mean I'm not working late nights and weekends. I'm taking every Friday afternoon off. You get the idea, but we're being intentional about how we spend our time, because how we spend our time is how we spend our life, right? So we reinvest. Now for me, once I got these workbooks dialed in, I did the rebuild, I felt a lot more like this dude. Yeah, it's kicked back. And so it was a complete transformation from being that stressed out person, working late nights, working weekends, coming in cranky, grouchy, grumpy, to feeling more like this guy. I ended up having more time than work, which was weird, but awesome. I felt relaxed at work. I was working no late nights, no weekends. I had a much better work-life balance. So it is my hope that this process can be as effective for you as well, and help you recapture some time as well. That's the end of my presentation. If you would be so kind to do an evaluation, that would be great. Here's another QR code for Microsoft Excel Teams seeking research participants. But that's basically it. I am open for Q&A. Let's see here. So if there's any questions, feel free to chat them in. Okay. Otherwise, if you would like to be notified every time I write a new Excel article or blog post, feel free to subscribe to the Excel University blog. And the way that you do that is just head here, click on blog, and you can subscribe basically right here. Click subscribe, and you could expect about 1 email per week. Sometimes I take a week off, but I try to be consistent. And then a couple times a year, I have some free webinars, so you'll get an invitation to those as well. But I'd love it if you'd consider joining the blog. And here's the deal. Excel's a really big place, and I learn stuff about it all the time. And when I do, I'm writing about it. So if you'd like to learn Excel right along with me, feel free to subscribe to the blog. And also hit me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to stay connected there with you as well. So Liam, I'm a few moments early, but if there are questions, I can certainly field them. I don't see anything coming in, however.
No, there's nothing yet. Nothing yet I see there. Does anyone have any questions for Jeff? Type in now. You've stunned them with your knowledge, Jeff.
Well, hopefully I didn't mess up your schedule by ending early instead of late. So I
No,
wanted
that's
to
right.
make sure to get it done.
I feel guilty for Rishi, but no, it's okay. We try and make sure everyone has the same amount of time.
Cool.
That's fine. We may have some questions in a second. What I might do is I might take the screen back for a second. A bit dangerous after my internet dropped out before, but I'll just take it back so I can just do the survey things while it gives people time to type questions out, Jeff, and I'll come back to you in a second if I may.
Perfect.
This is the thing. Just give me 1 second while this event will go in a minute. Right, just a second. So we have in here, I'm going to just remind you of evaluations. Now, I know this seems to be a one-off Excel Virtually Global conference. I'll just point out that we're planning to do this weekly. No, we're not. But if we do it again, it'd be good to know what's gone well, what hasn't, and trust me, we know some of the things that could have gone a little bit better. If you could fill out the surveys, that would be a delight. We do like reading those, and it does help us plan for the future. Be it if we don't do another one as big as this, we do the physical conferences quite regularly, and it's great that Jeff and other presenters could be worldwide. Do remember to say which session it is you're talking about. If the QR code doesn't work for you, you can use the bit.ly link. And also, I know nobody has seen this yet. So has anyone noticed this slide? The Microsoft Excel team is seeking research participants. So again, if you would like to be contacted to provide feedback and participate in future research studies, please sign up. So again, that's the actual link there. I think we're getting some things now, Jeff. So I might put this back to the questions page here. We've got Kevin said, nice, Jeff, thanks. And it's called it provenance. I'll publish Jason Lawson's comment query. Can you use a form to remotely update a master spreadsheet?
Yeah, so I would think that the way to do that would be through the online rather than the desktop version of Excel. And I personally don't have much experience with the online forms, but Liam, have you used those much?
I'll tell you who's very good at the online forms. Actually, I have used them a bit, but we have Han is going to be taking over. Han Tran is a moderator who's coming in on me. I don't want to actually say to Han at this moment in time because she might be sorting out a future presenter, Echo Swinford. If you are around, Han, say hello. I'm not going to. I've got a feeling she might be tied up offline here, but yes, we do use the online forms quite a bit, and they have been quite successful. So we use them with Power Automate, and so we will trigger things. For instance, so all the email invitations that went out for this event, we actually sorted it out so that Eventbrite downloaded them into an Excel spreadsheet, and then that triggered something in Power Automate, so then it will release forms and things like that. So Han is our guru on that.
Brilliant.
Sorry, so she can't talk. If she comes up in a minute, I'll ask if she comes up for air in a second.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think that would be the way to go. I feel like that with the desktop version, you know, forms within the company and writing it back might be difficult. So I think that online is probably the area to explore. And then, of course, that can always be pulled down into a desktop version of Excel if we need. Gary says, great, thanks, Jeff, great presentation. Any tips for those parts of the business who provide data to buy into the process? Any tips for getting those parts of the business who provide data? Oh, provide data. Well, I don't know. This process is more about the taking that source data and then taking it like from there. So in terms of people who are providing the data sources for our data models or for our workbooks, that might be, but you know, maybe I'm struggling understanding. So maybe post back the question if you can rephrase that. But no, I just think in general this is going to be a process that's helped me and lots of students of mine really stay focused on eliminating the manual tasks. In other words, it's the same sort of skills that we've had in terms of bringing in data and updating the reports. Really, it's about this systematic way to optimize and stay focused on eliminating the manual tasks, improving efficiency, and then also considering accuracy as well. So cool. Hey, thanks. Vincent, I would love a weekly Excel Virtually Global. That would be awesome.
Hang on, Vincent. Hang on. We'll all be dead this end, I'm telling you. Vincent, are you going to help moderate next time? We would love some people over in Europe for the early morning sessions. Sorry, Jeff, I interrupted. Feel free to carry on.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, this is quite an effort that you've put together. Thank you, by the way, for putting this together. I can only imagine how much time and energy you've put into this. It must be a lot. Let's see, would you add steps that state to update the Power Query and pivot table? Yeah, absolutely. So our new list of manual steps looks more like one step. Click data, refresh all, or whatever. And it might be something more like take the export and save it into this folder, and then open up the Excel workbook and click data refresh all. Something along those lines. Oh, and then, look at the review or look at the error check sheet to make sure everything is green and good to go. But yes, definitely that would be a manual step that belongs on that start here sheet. Not create, I meant create. Oh, great presentation. Hey, thank you, John. I really appreciate that. And Vincent says, I'll gladly moderate. Awesome.
Can you start now? Well, thank you, Vincent. We'll be talking offline to you in 3 seconds. We're all off to the pub. Except we're all quarantined.
Yeah, you definitely deserve that, my friend. How many hours left do you have?
We are almost there. We've got 4 complete sessions left. It's so the countdown is on. You were session 51 of 55. Originally, this was going to just be a 2-day event, just a 2-day event. 48. We had more presenters put their hands up than we had places. I didn't want to turn anyone down, so anybody who asked, we got in. The only reason I've done 2 sessions is not because I'm greedy. It's just unfortunately we said what the start time was, and the Microsoft presenter could not make it or get a substitute. But yeah. So we think this is the biggest Excel virtual conference ever put on. I'm not saying it's been put on completely without a glitch, but it was ambitious, and trust me, we've got at least 2 of us in the team, I think, and I'm going to ask if we can be Teams MVPs next time.
You've learned a lot about Teams, I'm sure.
Oh this. My goodness! Yeah.
Oh man. Good deal.
Jeff, I think there's no more questions. I would like to say thank you very, very much for coming on board. It's been greatly appreciated. Yet again, the feedback so far received has been very good, and I think it's good to see that so many people still so engaged, given we're 51 hours in. I know there's 1 or 2 out there who were trying to do the whole thing, and I'm wondering if I know one of them was getting a bit upset because they fell asleep for about 10 minutes during one session, asking if they could see it, and I just think you are crazy people. But I've only had about 4 hours sleep in this event. I haven't been on the whole time.
Wow.
But it's no, and Tim's had less. I think it's the thing going through, but it's I wouldn't want to forget. I think Jonathan Lau has already done his last stint, so he's going through. We'll probably all try and come on right at the very end, but Han's going to be next. So, Jeff, thank you very, very much. We might wrap that session up there. Han, are you around, my friend? I'll introduce Han Tran, who some of you will already know has been moderator. If you're around, yes, she's opened up a mic. Hi, Han.
Hello, good morning from Sydney.
Welcome aboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign off. This is actually my last scheduled session of this. I'll probably come on right at the end when Tim's wrapping up and just say goodbye if I haven't completely fallen asleep. But thank you very much to everyone who has got this far with us, and I hope you've been enjoying it. We're going to have a short break now. It's coming up to 8 p.m. UTC GMT time. It's almost 6 a.m. the next day here in Sydney and Melbourne, Australia. Yes, I can tell I've got an Australian accent as well, as you can probably notice, but I have lived here nearly 20 years now. We'll be back in a few minutes. Hannah will open up the session. Next up is going to be Jan Carl Peters with Smart VBA macro recording, and I'm not even going to try and attempt to pronounce the next bit because he will just laugh at me. So thank you very much. I'm going to sign off now, and Han will be back on in a few minutes. Have a break.